Today's daf is daf Hey, and the Gemara was trying to understand, as we saw on the top of this daf yesterday, why Rav Oshia did not include Eidim Zomim. And the Gemara attributes that to the fact that Rabbi Oshia accepts Rabbi Akiva, who classifies Eidim Zomim as a knas, and therefore Rav Oshia omits it from his counting of the Avos Nezika because he's only counting chiyuvei mamon and not knas. And that's why Rabbi Akiva says ein mishalmim al pi atzmon, which would mean that if Eidim came forward in Bezdin, and Bezdin has no knowledge independent of these Eidim that they were zomimim, they were found to be Eidim zomim and other Bezdin, and by their own admission they were condemned of the guilt of being Eidim zomim, they don't have to pay kasher zomam because Eidim zomim is a knas. So the Gemara asks, if indeed Rabbi Oshia holds Rabbi Akiva, then we have a problem. Because back on Daf Dalet Amud Beis, when we raised the question of why Adam is listed twice, once in the first Mishnah and again later on at Daf Tezvav, and the Gemara answers because it's Adam di Azik Shar and Adam di Azik Adam. And in the case of Adam Diasik Adam, in addition to paying Nezek, he pays Tsar, Ripu, Shevas, and Boshes. So now the Gemara asks, Lisni Trey Gavni Shar. According to Rabbi Akiva, there are actually two categories of Shar, and this is recorded in the Mishnah later on at Daf Lamed Gimel, and that is that if a Shar was Nogeach another Shar, it's a Shar Tam on the first three Negichos, and he only pays nezek chatzi nezek. But if a shar is nogech an adam, then he pays nezek shalom even on the first occasion. There's no such thing as a shar tam with regard to the case of a shar that attacks a person. Therefore, listening shar diazik shar, the listening shar diazik adam. There should be two categories and two different avos, just like we saw in the case of shar being mazik a shar being mazik an adam. So to the reverse, an Adam, just as, I'm sorry, in the case of Adam Diazik Shar and Adam Diazik Adam, there are two categories. In the flip, in the reverse of a Shar, there should be two categories of Shar Diazik Shar, where he pays on the first three Negichos Nezek Chatzi Nezek, and then a separate Av to be enumerated in the case of Shar Diazik Adam, where, according to Rabbi Akiva, he pays Nezek Shalom immediately on the first Negicha. There's no Tamus with regard to a shar that attacks a human being. Rabbi Akiva Omer Aftam Shechavel B'Adam Mishalem B'Mosar Nezek Shalom, which means that if the shar attacks an Adam and the Adam in self-defense will damage the shar, then we calculate how much the damage is to the shar, how much is the damage to the Adam, and the owner of the shar will have to pay the differential between those two. That's called Mosar. In any event, we see clearly that although a shar that attacks a shar is only a shar tam to pay chatzi nezek for the first three negichas, but in the case of shar shenagach adam, he pays nezek shalom already on the first negicha. So the Gemara answers, Hatavre Rabbi Akiva l'gzize. Rabbi Akiva very severely restricted his chiddush, the scope of his chiddush. Desanya, we learned in the Brayso Rabbi Akiva Omer, and we said that a tam shechaval bi adam pays nezek shalom, as if he were a sharmuad, even on the first negicha. Yachal, I might think that af tam shechaval bi adam yishalim in aliyah. We should now add another din of min aliyah, because in general, when a shar is nogech a shar, for the first three negichas of a shar tam, he only pays me gufo shel shar. That means if chatzi nezek amounts to, let's say, 500, and the shar itself, we're not sure if it's the shar of the mazik, the shar of the nizak, but the shar itself is worth, let's say, only 300, then he pays up to 300, even though the Chatzi Nezek was 500. That's called Migufa Mishalim. Min aliyah means he pays the full price from his pocket, not from the gufo shel shor. And therefore, the Gemara now gives the following answer that Rabbi Akiva holds that in the case of a shor tam shechol bi adam, the din is not exactly identical to that of a shor muad who pays min aliyah, but rather he only pays mi gufo shel shor. V'enu mishal min aliyah. So we see clearly that a shor shehizik adam is not really going to pay nezek shalom. He may pay nezek shalom, but he might pay a lot less than nezek shalom because he only plays mi gufo and not min aliyah. So therefore, Rabbi Oshia didn't want to include nizkei shor ba'adam as a separate av, because then it would imply that the dinim of muad kick in from the first negicha when he attacks an adam. And that's not really true because he pays min ha'aliyah. I'm sorry, he pays not min aliyah, but min gufo shel shor. Gemara now asks the following question: who listening? In all these cases, the Torah has established an objective set money that you have to pay. For example, chamishim kesef in ones umefater, and me'amah in the case of motzi shema. So this is case of mamon. Why did Rabbi Oshia shy away from listing these cases as avos nezikin, which would jack up the number from 13 to 16? And the Gemara says, Mimonafsha. Nezek, if you're talking about not the 50 shkolim that he pays as a penalty, but rather nezek, so then tanale. Rabbi Yoshia has nezek in his list of 13 avos nezikin. Ve'it tsar tanale. Tsar is also listed here by Rabbi Oshia. Ve'iboshes tanale is also listed. Ve'ipagam. And if you talk about chiv pagam, hainu nezek. What is the only possibility here? By process of elimination, it's be the chamishim kesef. Well, that's knosu, but knosa lo kamayri. We've already established that Rabbi Oshia does not list knosa; he only lists mamona, and the 50 shkolim kesef is knosa. The Gemara asks about metami, menasik to mamonu listening. What about the cases where somebody deliberately was metame something of yours and it went down in value, or he's metame, he mixed it up with truma, or menasek, he poured it as a libation in front of avodah zarah? In all these cases, there is an adam amazik and he pays, and therefore it should be included in the avos. And the Gemara says, if we're holding that even though the hezek is not physical, you cannot see the change from tara to tumah, or for that matter, even in medami menasech, he really hasn't changed the physicality. But we hold hezek shenenika shmei hezek, so then ha tari le nezek, it's already included on the nezek. Be'i hezek shenenika lo shmei hezek, then knasa havile knasa lo kamayri. If the tashlumin in the cases of metame v'dami v'nasech are not b'toras nezek because hezek shenenika lo shmei hezek, but nevertheless they pay b'din a penalty of knas, that should not be listed in Rabbi Oshia's listing because he's only listing moment and not knas. Gemara asks the following question: what about Rabbi Chia? Rabbi Chia, in his count of 24 avos nezikin, includes 8 for metame, medame, menasech. Each one is an av unto itself. I'm sorry if I said 8, I meant 3. Right? Metame, medame, menasech. Lema kasav should assume that Rabbi Chia holds hezek shenenika lo shmei hezek, and Rabbi Chia is open to counting knosa. The ishmei hezek hatoni le nezek. If you're going to say that hezek shenenika shmei hezek according to Rabbi Chia, then he already has it listed on the nezek. And the Gemara answers, Tana hezeka de minkara, Tana hezeka de minkara. Rabbi Chia wants to count a separate Av in the calculations of the Avos Nezikin for Hezek Sheinu Nika, meaning when you don't see, and it's not obvious to the naked eye, any physical change in the object. It's now Tome, it's now Medame, it's now Manasseh. Now again, it could have been enough for Rabbi Chia just to say Hezek Sheinu Nika, and that would have included all three cases of Mitame, Manasseh, Medame. But Tosfos says that since in the Mishnah Gittin, all three of these cases were listed, therefore Rabbi Chia lists them here as three different Avos Nezikin. And this is similar to what we see about Metzia Tzadi Gimel, that there are four Shomrim, and they are counted as the four Avos here in our Gemara, Kevan Shekach Heim Shnuyim B'Mishnah. So the Gemara says the following. Our Tana says there are four Avos to exclude the 12 of Rav Oshia. Rav Oshia, Tana Minyana, I'm sorry, 13 of them. And Rabbi Oshia, Tana Minyana, has the 13. Lim'ute de Rabbi Chia. He doesn't go with Rabbi Chia, who has 24. Ela Minyana de Rabbi Chia, Lim'ute Mai, the minion, the number which Rabbi Chia says, which is 24, not more, what's it coming to exclude? And the Gemara answers, L'm'ute Moser Umefagel. Moser means when you tell the Goyim, you can collect from this Jew's field, points to the field. And Mefagel means that when a Kohen shechted the carbon, he had a machshavas pigul. For example, he had in mind a different carbon, and he shechted a chatos l'shem shlamim. The carbon is possible, and the Baal carbon has to bring a replacement carbon. And the Kohen in turn has to pay tashlumei nezikin. He has to pay compensation because he was the one who had the wrong kavanah. So the Gemara says, "V'lisni, why didn't Rabbi Chia have these of Moser Umefagel on his list, which would have jacked it up from 24 to 26? Bishlei Mefagel, I can understand why Rabbi Chia was avoiding Mefagel because Bekochim Lo Kamayri. None of the Avos Nezikim in Rabbi. So we can justify that Rav Oshia omitted Mefagel because the Mishnah and the Brisa are only including Niskei Chulin, but not Niskei Kachin. Elamoser my time alotani. Person points out to the Akum, you should be confiscating that Yankel's property, which is called a Moser. Why isn't that listed? He has to pay. And Rav Chia includes even Knas. Shani Moser de Dibura Ubedibura Lo Kamayri. Rabbi Chia is only listing physical damages, not verbal damages. So the Gemara objects, Vaha Motzi Shema to Dibura Huviktani. Rabbi Chia counts in his listing of 24 Avos Nezikim Motzi Shema, which is only Dibur. And the Gemara answers Dibur di Ispe Maisahu. Because what happens is the Motzi Shema did a Be'ila with a Basula, and then he was Motzi Shema. And he's only chayiv if he does the Be'ila and then the Motzi Shema. The Dibur is a tag-along or a second stage in the Be'ila, so it's really a Maisa. Frek the Gemara of Edom Zom Dibur the Lesbe Maisahu. There's no Maisa in the case of Edom Zomimim. They just spoke and perjured themselves in a court of law with false Edus. That's Dibur. And nevertheless, Uktani. So why is Moser different than Edom Zomim? And the Gemara says, "Hasam afagav the Lesle Meiser Achmonakari Meiser the Siv va'asisim lo kasher zomim lasos liot." So that even though the Edom only spoke and presented an oral testimony in front of Beis, nevertheless it's considered a Meiser by the Torah, which means that the Bezdin issued a horah based on the edus, and that's considered like a mice. The Gemara clarifies, why does it say 4 avos, Michlal Dikatoldos, El Rab Chiv Rab Oshia, avos, Michlal Dikatoldos, Toldos my new. We don't know if in all these cases that Rabbi Oshia or Rabbi Chia adds that there are any toldos. Rabbi Abba Kulam Ka'avos L'Shalim Beitav. What it means is, you're right, there are no toldos. Why do we call it an Av? And the answer is, it has the same status as an Av L'Nizikin L'Shalim Beitav. And my timer that's based Isa on Exer Shava, which is called Tachas Nesina Yishalim Kesed. Now, the truth of the matter is that it's strange that the Gemara says that the use of the term avos, in other words, the reason why Rabbi Oshia and Rabbi Chia are employing the word avos is to teach you that you pay meitav, when in fact the toldos of the avos also pay meitav. So the din of paying meitav of idis is not a function or depend upon avos, the shem avos. Even the shem toldos would generate a chiyuv to pay mina meitav. But nevertheless, the nezikin that are listed, whether it's in Rabbi Chia's listing of 13 or Rabbi Chia's listing of 24, if they wouldn't use or employ the term avos, nobody would know the din is to pay meitav. Now, in all of the nezikin, one by one, it always uses one of these words, tachas nesina yeshalim kesef. And therefore, we get a gzeira shalom. So, for example, in Shein and Regel, it says Yeshalem. And therefore, whenever we see the word Yeshalem, we derive an Exer Shah from Shein and Regel that you pay Meitav. In this case, Shar, it says Shalem Yeshalem Shar Tachas Shar. So again, we have the Lashon of Yeshalem, and he pays Meitav. Now, as far as Tachas is concerned, when it says shar tachas shar, it's telling you that you pay meitav, and therefore, whenever it says tachas, we derive from exer shar from shar that it requires paying meitav. So, for example, when the parsha says that shoshan ogach eved is kesef shloshim shkolim yitein ladonov, so now we have the word nesina, and so forth and so on. And in the 4 Shomrim, for example, we always have the word Yishalem. It says Asher Yashin Elohim Yishalem. And through this Xeris Shava, we learn that Yishalem means to pay Meitav. The Mishnah says, Lo Arei Ashor Karei Mave, Maika Omar. What does the Tana mean when he writes Lo Arei Ashor Karei Mave? Apparently, the Tana wants to enumerate the chumras of each one of the nezikin, of the Avos nezikin. This is what the Mishnah has in mind. It means that if the Torah would have written one of the Avos nezikin, then we could derive the other Av Nezikin from the one that's written in the Torah. For example, if the Torah would have written Shar, we would have derived Maveh in a Bamematzinu, because the Torah is being Mechayev, in this case Shar, because Shmirasan Alecha, and so too, in the case of Maveh, the Torah should say that it's your problem and you have to protect against it. And if you don't protect against it, then it's Shmiras and Alecha and Yechayiv Tashlim. Hadar Omar, now the Tana says, Chada Mechana Lo Aseh. No. We cannot derive one Av from the other. You couldn't derive Shar from Maveh or the reverse. Each one has its own Chumrah. And that Chumrah is going to be the Sibas HaChiyuv. So let's say, for example, if the Torah would have only written shar, then shar is, let's say, kavanos lahazik. So that's the chum of shar. And you couldn't necessarily derive maveh, which is shein, according to Aman Yomer. And the animal is not motivated to do hezek, it's not kavanos lahazik. Then the Mishnah says, Lo zeves sheyesh b'hem ruach chayim. Maika Omar, Marav Sharshim, Shmei Rav Hachi Omar.